be here now. That's different from we seem to be all here. As I ring this Tibetan bowl, let's relax into this common time and space, realizing that we do need to be together. We yearn for connection, the familiar faces of friends, and the sound of shared voices. Let us find an inner peace away from the hubbub of our daily lives for a little while this morning. Thank you, Michael. Once again, good morning, friends, members, visitors, both here and in the sanctuary, and those joining us on Zoom. Our mission here at UUCR is to inspire, inform, and support all who seek spiritual and personal growth and a more equal and just community. I'm Jan Sprinkle, worship leader today, joining our guest speaker, Reverend Karen Marsh, for our service. She's been a Unitarian Universalist for over 30 years. In addition to serving the Unitarian Universalists of Boston, Reverend Marsh is a chaplain at several hospitals in Baltimore. Prior to serving Paulson, she was the affiliated community minister at Towson Unitarian Universalist Church and a ministerial intern at All Souls Unitarian Church of Tulsa, Oklahoma. She graduated from the Star King School for the Ministry in May of 2020, was granted preliminary fellowship by the UUA in April 21, and was ordained by the Towson Church in May 2022. Before answering the call of ministry, Reverend Marsh was an active lay leader of TUUC, that's the Towson Church, and worked first as an environmental scientist and then as an environmental attorney. I like those credentials. Thank you for including us in your very busy schedule this morning. I have some announcements. Hopefully I can sort them all out. As you came in, I am sure you noticed there was a generous set of snacks and food. There is a lunch after the service. It will be followed by a budget talk, so plan to stick around. And let me also point out that your pledge packets, extra pledge packets, are in the lobby. And remember, the deadline for the return is February 28th. But why wait? And finally, the pledge line presentation will be Zoomed. So those of you on Zoom, just stay there. The same link for the service will work for the presentation, or you can just remain online. The presentation will not be recorded. The second announcement, UUCR is stepping into an exciting new phase as we bid farewell to Reverend Sue on her retirement in June and look ahead to a new half-time contract minister. Please join the Ministry Search Committee on February 18th following the worship service for a ministry visioning discussion. We'll consider what our priorities are as we look ahead to our next minister and what and how we would like to develop as a congregation in partnership with the new minister. For what it's worth, I'm a member of the Ministry Search Committee, so any questions can come my way also. Third announcement. No one has signed up for this month's potluck. Therefore, it is canceled. I think that's sad. And now, let us light our chalice. Brother Marsh will lead words that are in your order of service, and I will light our chalice.
Thank you, Dan. Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Well, as you all know, the chalice, the flaming chalice, is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. So every week, every gathering we use will always light that chalice. So I now invite you to join me in citing the words in your program. We light our chalice as a symbol of gratitude as we celebrate the abundance of our lives together. May we be grateful for the ways we nourish and uplift each other, for it is the sharing of this hallowed time together that sustains us. Well, there's no better way to breathe with each other than to sing with each other. I invite you now to sing hymn 155, Circle Round for Freedom.
You can choose either of the harmony lines to sing as you are able. Okay. Circle round for freedom.
from the Reverend Betts Meineke. As we gather together this morning, may we learn to recognize and affirm the pieces of possibility, the bits of good we bring. May we encourage rather than control, love rather than possess, enable rather than envy, allowing our individual gifts to weave a patchwork of peace. The soft, deep blue of sensitivity and understanding, the red energy of creativity, the white heat of convictions, the risky, fragile green of new growth, the golden flashes of gratitude, the warm rose of love. Each of us is indispensable. If we are to minister to a broken and wounded world, together in our gathered diversity, we form the whole. So be it.
For those of you brave enough to come up here close to me, we'll now enter our time of sharing, acknowledgments of the heart. For those in the sanctuary, simply come up and take the microphone to speak, and I'll light the candle. But first, I'll light a candle for all of the suffering in the world and violence from both Ukraine and the Middle East and elsewhere throughout. I'll light the first candle.
Thank you. I have a couple joys, and my name is Linda Weimer. One is that I belong to a writers group almost from the first few months. I moved here in September 2010 and recently have had some really happy events and grown a lot closer, and I'm very thankful that I found them so soon after moving here. And the other good news is I don't know how many of you have discovered the replacement restaurant at Beverly's. Y'all, I've had 2 lunches there and I'm very happy with them. It's great for those of us living alone to have some place just to go and be around people. Yeah. Farmer's table. Right.
Thank you, Linda.
It's open every 7 days. Can't believe it. I hope they last. Till 8 o'clock at night.
Mm.
So my joy is that my mother and father drove 11 hours to come visit us for a few days. So very happy to have her here, and it's been nice to run into a few of you all since she's been in town.
Great, thank you. Well, for these items of joy and concern shared, mostly joy today, let me light one more candle for those that are kept in our hearts and held there. Let us now have a moment of silence. Blessed be. I now have these words, a meditation from the Reverend Gretchen Haley. For this one moment, know only that you are loved, that you are safe and whole and loved. Know that you belong here, here among us, here upon this earth in your body, however tired or broken your heart may be, whatever fear, disappointment, anger you carry, for this hour, know that you are not alone. Feel the presence of others surrounding you, breathing beside you and with you, discovering together the way our voices rise and fall together in harmony, in hope. Claim here a resilient freedom, the choice for love, for light, to live with joy and gratitude and praise as a form of resistance. And now it's totally appropriate to pass the baskets for our offertory this morning. I encourage you to be generous and enjoy Michael's music.
There's nothing like a little Creedence Clearwater revival on a Sunday morning. Amen. Hallelujah.
It's the Allsparrow War Punch.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I loved the pieces that you picked out, including the Stevie Wonder in the very beginning. Just so perfect. Thank you, Michael. This congregation is really blessed to have you. So. Well, this is Black History Month. Now, I think Black History Month should be every month, but February is an important time for us to visit the writings of some of the great philosophers and activists of our time and of the past. Today's reading will come then from James Baldwin, who was a great essayist, writer, and of course, civil rights activist. And this is an excerpt from an essay that he wrote that's contained in the book, Nobody Knows My Name. I suggest that the role of the Negro in American life has something to do with our concept of what God is, and from my point of view, this concept is not big enough. It has got to be made much bigger than it is, because God is, after all, not anybody's toy. To be with God is really to be involved with something enormous, overwhelming desire and joy and power which you cannot control, which controls you.
I conceive of my own life as a journey towards something I do not understand, which in the going toward makes me better. I conceive of God, in fact, as a means of liberation and not a means of controlling others. Love does not begin and end the way we seem to think it does. Love is a battle. Love is war. Love is a growing up. No one in the entire world knows Americans better, or, as odd as it may sound, loves them more than the American Negro. This is because he has had to watch you, outwit you, deal with you, and bear you, and sometimes even bleed and die with you. Ever since we got here, that is, since both of us, black and white, got here. And this is a wedding. Whether I like it or not, whether you like it or not, we are bound together forever. We are part of each other. What is happening to every Negro in this country at any time is also happening to you. There's no way around this. I am suggesting that these artificial walls, which have been up so long to protect us from something we fear, must come down. I think that what we really have to do is to create a country in which there are no minorities. For the first time in the history of the world, the one thing that all Americans have in common is that they have no other identity apart from the identity of which is being achieved on this continent. The necessity of Americans to achieve an identity is an historical and a present personal fact. And this is the connection between you and me. James Baldwin, from his essay, In Search of a Minority. So it looks like I am stuck with technology sometimes.
It's not our friend.
Well, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But yes, I have now found my sermon. All's fair in love and war. Y'all have heard that, right? Well, that phrase popped in my head when I was planning services for the first half of 2024. I often have a little writer's retreat every 6 months where I plan what I'm going to speak on for the next 6 months. Now, the UU theme-based ministry program, Soul Matters, designated February's theme to be justice and equity. But as the Soul Matters theme for January was just liberating love, and February contains Valentine's Day, the adage, all's fair in love and war, seemed to be a really great segue into the theme of justice and equity. Scholar Dr. Cornell West says that justice is what love looks like in public. I get that. But all's fair in love and war is a bit more curious to me. So I decided to do a little research. Where did this phrase come from? And it's been attributed to John Lilly, a 16th century British author and playwright, who wrote a book entitled, forgive me, I don't speak Greek, Euphues, The Anatomy of Wit. Originally, perhaps, and certainly over the years, the phrase has come to mean that one can do or say anything in matters of war and romantic love. In other words, fair play doesn't apply. Anything goes. One can steal and cheat and lie, and the ends justify the means. Well, I don't think that's true. But Western culture seems to have embraced that idea as truth. While that interpretation certainly bothers me, What bothers me more is the equation of love with war. Many people have expressly compared love to war, as evidenced by numerous songs and books and movies with variations of that adage, including Stevie Wonder's All in Love is Fair, which you just heard. And many thought leaders have used the comparison in their writings. For instance, Baltimore journalist H.L. Mencken once said, "Love is like war, easy to begin, but very hard to stop." And James Baldwin, whom you just heard, said, "Love is a battle, love is a war." How can that be? Aren't love and war the opposite of each other? If you love someone, how can you harm or even kill them intentionally? Still, this equating of the two concepts seems to resonate in some weird way. It brings to mind a scene from the 1992, what I call a legal documentary, My Cousin Vinny. Maybe you've seen the movie. Starring Joe Pesci, Marissa Tomei. The scene begins in a courtroom, and lawyer Vinny Gambini just had an argument with his fiancée, Mona Lisa Vito. Now, in spite of her long nails, her big hair, her slinky dresses, and her 4, maybe 5-inch stilettos, Miss Vito is a mechanic from a long line of mechanics. And Vinny wants her to serve as an expert witness in the case at hand, but she's resistant. When Vinny asks permission to treat her as a hostile witness, which basically allows him to ask leading questions, Miss Vito says, "You think I'm hostile now? Wait till you see me tonight." And the judge asks, "Do you two know each other?" And Vinny answers, "Yeah, she's my fiancée." "Well," the judge responds, "that would certainly explain the hostility." It's a funny line, you laugh. And I'm sure I laughed too when I first saw the movie. But I wonder now, why is that funny? I mean, human often reveals truths about our common experience as humans. And this situation is no different. The scene from My Cousin Vinny reveals the push and pull in love relationships, really all relationships. And this push and pull seems natural, regardless of the culture or the times. After all, relationships consist of individuals with their own self-interests that may or may not be aligned with the interests of their beloved or beloveds. These interests can be big, like one person wants to live in the country and the other wants to live in the city. Or mundane, like one person wants pizza for dinner while the other one wants burgers. All relationships require negotiating and balancing the parties' interests. Yet, these writers and artists seem to suggest that violence is a part of love. Looking up the lyrics to Stevie Wonder's All in Love is Fair, I came across a video of him singing it. And he introduces the song by saying, "After me and my lady broke up, I wrote this song right before I broke her jaw." Kidding, 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 kidding. It really pained me to hear that. I love Stevie Wonder. It made me really uncomfortable. But I realized that Stevie Wonder was drawing on a theme that appears to have been around for a very long time. More than centuries, probably millennia, going all the way back to the Greek Empire. Well, think about Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew and the violence that's depicted in that play. I think of the Punch and Judy puppet show Any of you remember that? And I remember watching those when I was a little kid and thinking, there's something wrong with this. Well, the seeming violence in James Baldwin's quote, love is a battle, love is a war, drove me to look for its context of the myriad of essays and writings of James Baldwin. And I did finally find it in this essay called In Search of a Majority. Now, like many of Baldwin's writings, the essay addresses the state of race relations in the United States. It was written in 1961, which is why you hear the phrase Negro, which was the acceptable use at the time. In this essay, he ponders the meanings of majority and minority in terms of white and Black Americans. Stating, "This is a wedding," he ultimately compares the relationship between Blacks and whites to a marriage. No one in the entire world knows Americans better or loves them more than the American Negro, says Baldwin. Indeed, noting our interdependence with each other, Baldwin argues that this struggle between Blacks and whites is a defining trait of the American identity. I found this essay to be a fascinating take on race that I think is still very relevant today, which is why I wanted to bring it to your attention. And Baldwin makes some points in this essay that help me to understand why love is equated to war in our culture. You see, just before he speaks of love, Baldwin speaks of control. Specifically, he talks about God as a source of liberation, not as a means to control others. And it reminded me of UU ethicist Dr. Sharon Welch's book, A Feminist Ethic of Risk, in which she posits that Western society runs on an ethic of control. You might be asking, what is an ethic of control? Well, it's an approach to living that makes power over or domination the ultimate good. Indeed, control is the goal and not just the means to an end. In such a society, justice is violence, not love in public, as Dr. Cornel West said. And because dominance by definition is the opposite of equity, obtaining equity in the larger society is basically impossible. A feminist ethic of risk gave me a different lens to view human behavior and our current situation. Now I witness the ethic of control at work everywhere. Like, on the highway, coming here, how I was being tailgated by a car, flashing their lights and trying to get me to go faster. That's the ethic of control working, as well as domination. And on social media, when you go on a site and you see somebody making horrible comments, passing around conspiracy theories, why do people do that? I think it's because they are trying to stoke fears to get people to behave in a certain way. After all, the January 6th, and I'm going to call it insurrection, was stoked by all of these conspiracy theories. Why? Because the leaders of this wanted people to act in a certain way. It's control. Bullying, whether it's in person, whether it's online, is all domination and an effort to control, basically keep you from not doing anything. And even the school shootings that seem to be now par for the course, the American brand of terrorism, have the same aim: control us by keeping us afraid. I've even looked at my own relationships in the past, my relationship with my father, and seen how the ethic of control and domination entered into those relationships, even though there was real love there. There was tension beyond just the normal push and pull, a normal balance of interests. I do recall some of my romantic partners making degrading comments to me in order to keep me in line. And I have to admit, my dad did the same thing sometimes. Indeed, for most of my young life, well into my 30s, I was afraid of my father because of the subtle and sometimes not so subtle threat of violence. I mean, he never, as I don't remember him ever causing me any physical abuse, or to my siblings, well, once to one of my siblings, but it was just that constant fear that at any time he could snap. That is the ethic of control. That is how it plays into our personal lives. But that brings me back to love as war. If our Western culture so values dominance, it's more than possible that we've conflated love with dominance and control, especially in familial relationships between men and women. Of course, I can speak only for myself, but I am, as you noticed, a petite woman, and I've always been small relative to others. You know, as a little kid, they measure your growth, and I always stayed on the smaller side. And I've always presented as female, no matter how masculine my clothing. As a geologist, I wore clothing that was pretty darn masculine. Now, while I haven't let that stop me from pursuing traditionally male-dominated fields like science and law, I have experienced sexual harassment and discrimination. And really, there was little I could do. Because, why? My managers and my coworkers weren't necessarily acting out of a conscious bias. They would just deny it if I said anything. But they were acting from an implicit bias, a subconscious socialization that taught them, as well as me, to assert dominance according to a strict social order where white men are at the top. So this idea of subconscious assumptions ruling our thoughts and words and actions may seem overwhelming. Yet naming this hidden force empowers me. Naming what's going on underneath gives me hope that we can change society. But like oppression, resistance begins here in the mind. My mind, your mind, individually. It begins when we dare to ask questions like those I'm asking today, like those James Baldwin asked. It's only then can we begin to separate out what is true and what is not. And more importantly, we can begin to construct new approaches and ways of being with each other. In that vein, the UUA is revising Article 2 of its bylaws to contain 7 values instead of the 7 principles and 6 sources. And one of the values is love. In fact, love is the foundational value in the proposed Article 2. I've spent the last month preaching and contemplating the meaning of love in Unitarian Universalism. And I'm convinced that we must be clear not only about what love is, but also what it is not. Now, I won't reiterate all my thoughts on what love is, but for purposes of today, I will say that love is care, not control. Love is equity, not dominance. And even though loving another may involve negotiation and at times even struggle, love is not a battle. It is not a war. Going forward, let's be clear on that so that we may liberate love from control and thus liberate ourselves. So with that, I invite you all to sing our hymn, which is in your service, number 160. Okay, great. So Jan tells me that we do have some time for discussion or sharing on the message. So is there anyone that has any thoughts, anything that the sermon stirred in you?
All is fair in love and war. What about war is fair? You know, it's it's accepting of the unfair. How can you kill people, destroy their property, and make them homeless and say it's all fair? So maybe it means it's a farcical statement more than a factual statement.
Could be.
Thank you. I've always heard it takes two to tango. And so being married a couple times, you know, you have your good times, your bad times, but it's a mutual thing, whereas it's a give and take. The main thing I wanted to say was, I come in here and I see no prejudice whatsoever, none. Never heard of it. Nobody brings it up, nobody says anything about it, and that's what I love about this church. However, I do have associates, not friends, but associates that still live in the past, and they still have derogatory words for certain cultures, and I find it hard. And I asked them, you know, do you have to say that? Can't you use a proper word for that? And it's hard. You know, my real friends, they're not like that. They're true friends, and they don't believe in prejudiceness. They believe all people are created equal, and I do believe that also. And no matter what background you come from, no matter how your life was lived, growing up, I never had a mother and father. And so I never had that fear of God put in me, you know? And so I just want to say that this is the only refuge I have, that I feel that we're all equal. Nobody's above anybody else here. I don't care if you have $1 million or you got 5 cents in your pocket. Nobody's treated any different here. And I love that about this church. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. You make us all feel better.
I think that it's commendable that people try to expand the concept of love universally, but we don't have to love everybody if we like them. We have other words like.
Yeah, that brings up the complexity of this concept of love. I preached at Falston, last 2 times I preached at Falston, it was all about love, right? And someone brought up, love is a verb, not a noun, really. And it's really the quality of what you do. We also talked a little bit about the difference between love and respect. That it's impossible for a human, with our brains the way they're set up, to form, psychologists say, anywhere between 150 or 200 intimate, more than 200 intimate relationships, right? Where I know you, you know me, we know things about each other, and where you feel comfortable sharing with each other. It seems to be a limit. So when I talk about love in the sort of universal agape sense, and I think this is maybe what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King is talking about, isn't so much that intimate relationship, but being able to respect others. You know, I love all the patients, the hundreds of patients I have seen over probably thousands at this point. Patients I have seen at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Every time I see one of these patients, many of them I only see once, I'm loving them. I'm loving them because love is an act. Because I respect them, I meet them where they're at. Some of them are Trump supporters. Some have expressed very racist, sexist, homophobic comments to me. Yet I can still sit in that space with them and appreciate them on that human level. And of course, this understanding too of control, social dominance, that this is the water we're swimming in, has really helped me to be able to sit in with those people, you know, and realize that, you know, it's maybe not just them, it's the culture that they've been brought up in. And they just don't understand that there is another perspective, and that it's okay to have another perspective.
A point of information, your 1 or 2 favorite Baldwin books.
Oh gosh. If Beale Street Could Talk. It's beautiful. Giovanni's Room. Well, I just got Nobody Knows My Name. So, but I'm really enjoying all those essays. Amazing. Just amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that I learned this definition for love this last year, and it's let others voluntarily evolve. And I think it absolutely matches what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Let others voluntarily evolve. Yeah. Thank you, that's really good for chaplaincy. Thank you. I'm gonna share that with my chaplains.
It's the elevator speech.
You often hear people ask, what is the reason or for a long-lasting marriage or relationship? And I really do think it's care and respect and trust. But I see the dominance taking over in bad relationships, and I really do think that's a product of a culture where dominance and control is learned and taught, and also that leads to viewing their partner as a possession sometimes.
That sums everything up.
This should be the final.
Okay, one quick thing I just heard this morning on Maine Public Radio. Love definition is friendship set to music.
I like that.
Now you've given me so much fodder for another sermon. Thank you. This is why I love talking sermons, right? These discussions that happen afterwards. I'm like, yeah, I didn't think of that way. So thank you. So I guess we're coming to our closing words.
Yes.
Yes, technology has failed me, so give me a moment to bring up our closing words.
Apparently the pulpit microphone's not working. If you could use that other microphone, it would help.
I was wondering, yeah, I thought that might be an issue.
I'm not going to do, all right, let me just see if I can bring up that closing words. I knew something would go wrong, because sermons and services can be like a wedding. There's always going to be something that's going to go wrong. Oh, here we go. There we go. So our closing words come from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. His central message really was love. This is where we are. Where do we go from here? First, we must massively assert our dignity and worth. We must stand up amidst a system that still oppresses and develop an unassailable and majestic sense of values. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And this is what we must see as we move on. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
As we extinguish the chalice, let's recite the words in the program, and then we'll have the sung benediction. And Michael, would you like to explain the postlude when we get there? Okay. The words are,
I'll lead it.
Please join me with the words in your program. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Excellent.
Into peace and
That's why my instrument is made of wood. Let's see. The postlude, Still die Nacht ist euch gestärkt, is a song, it's a Yiddish song written by Jewish partisans of World War II. Let's see, it opens with Still the night is full of stars and the frost burns. You know, it's a very picturesque scene. Then it describes the proper course of action for people who believe that there is everything is fair in war. I mean, the proper course of action as to what to do with them, rather. Still, die Nacht ist euch gestärkt und der Frost hat stark gebrennt. Sie gedenkst du, wie ich hab dich gelernt, halten a Speyer in die Hand. Sie gedenkst du, wie ich hab dich gelernt, halten a Speyer in die Hand. A Meut, a Pelzel und a Beret und halt in Hand fest anerkannt. A Meut mit der Sameten am Ponym, hit ob dem Säuners Karawan. A Meut mit der Sameten am Ponym, hit ob dem Säuners Karawan. Gezielt, geschossen und getroffen, hat der kleinen Pistol an heute Fuhlinken mit Waffen, verhalten hat sie mit ein Keul. An heute Fuhlinken mit Waffen, verhalten hat sie mit ein Keul. Vertog von Wald gekrochen, mit Schnee gelanden in die Hor. Gemutigt von kleinen Kinderzochen, vor unser neuem freien Dorf. Gemutigt von kleinen Kinderzochen, vor unser neuem freien Dorf.
Thank you, Michael. And join us for lunch, followed by a discussion.